Friends, I must first start by thanking all of you, because every single thing which Manish talked about for Tally has been achieved only because you all have loved it and you all have blessed it. Thank you so much for it. Today's session was titled as GST, the last frontier, the final frontier. I'd like to take first 3-4 minutes to give you a small background about why I'm going to say certain things. I was extraordinarily privileged 12 to 14 years ago when the first seeds of the thought about GST was being discussed in the intellectual circles which influenced the government. I won't claim to be the person who was part of the thinking. I was part of the person listening to the thinking, that it is something which is going to change the country in a manner which all of us will look back and say we were part of that moment in history, and all of us are going to benefit on the assumption that GST is actually going to become correctly possible. This extreme optimism of mine in the last 2 months has changed dramatically. Before I explain why, I just want to digress a little bit. My assumption is that more than 40-50% of the people in this room must be practicing chartered accountants. Is that right? Can I see a show of hands? How many are practicing? Wow, oh, almost 80%, I think. My other assumption is that more than 80% of your income of the practicing chartered accountants comes from what the government calls as the MSME, micro, small and medium enterprises. Is that right? Tally is one such company. More than 95% of my income comes from the MSME. Next year, none of you will remain in practice anymore, and nor will probably Tally remain in existence anymore, simply because our customers will not remain in existence anymore. That is the present outlook that we are seeing ahead of us. The sadness is not that this is what will occur. The sadness is that the people who can prevent it, and that is all of you sitting in this room, are perhaps not taking it seriously enough. Despite what CA Vikamsi said, despite what Mangesh Bhai has raised, I would like to dwell upon certain fundamental flaws in the GST law before we start addressing what all will become possible in case these flaws are removed. But in order for those flaws to be removed, if the most intellectual community of the country, which is the chartered accountant, the most respected profession, the most august body, is not willing to take a stand, then I am really genuinely afraid as to what is going to happen in the next several months. Yes, I am going to be one of the victims of that problem. And the only statement which I am making standing in front of you today is I am not going to go down without a fight. And all that I am requesting all of you to do is please do not go down without a fight. So what is the problem? So CA Vacancy raised that problem. And the government has an answer to that problem as to why the problem exists. That is, my input credit is dependent upon my supplier's payment to the government, not my supplier's compliance or commitment to the government or acceptance of his liability. It seems to be a very simple thing. So I'd like to do a small role play first. So the small role play is, Priyam Bhai is actually Maruti. Mangesh Bhai is a dealer of Maruti. I am a customer who buys a car from Mangesh Bhai, pays the money to Mangesh Bhai. The promise of Maruti to me is that your car will get 1 year of free service. So I go to Manish Bhai, who is the service center of Maruti, to get my free service. Manish Bhai refuses it, saying that I'm sorry, I cannot give you free service because Mangesh Bhai has not paid Priyam. It was Priyam's responsibility to appoint Mangesh Bhai as an agent, his responsibility to collect the money from Mangesh Bhai, but now it has become the responsibility of the buyer to ensure that the person he has paid the money to also continues and pays the money to the principal. The fundamental relationship between an agent and the responsibility of an agent is now being put into question. That is the whole premise of indirect tax first, right? The reason why it is called indirect tax is that instead of my paying directly to the government, I pay to an agent of the government who is the supplier. Now the responsibility which is being put on me is that no, not only do I disallow you to pay me directly, I am asking you to pay to my agent, and if the agent fails to pay me, I am going to penalize you. This fundamental flaw is going to kill the SME. Who is going to buy from the SME? Where is the SME going to find a new buyer? Where is the SME going to find a new supplier? And it takes only 1 month that in some month of July, incidentally I happened to have a marriage in my family, and incidentally I was 5 days delayed in making a payment. And therefore, my regular buyers came to know that I was not 100% compliant, and therefore I am a risk business to work with. Next month onwards, all of them are gone. It doesn't matter whether I have complied after 5 days. All I have done is I have proved that I am a potential risk business. Every single SME, whether they die in the first month, second month, third month, fourth month, fifth month, it doesn't matter. Next December, all of you whose income depends upon the SME will no longer exist because your clients will not exist. And this matter is not being brought up strongly enough. Surprisingly, let's understand the picture from the government side. From the time that input tax credit has come, we have to recognize that the innovative Indians have figured out ways to extract money from the government without paying tax. There's no doubt about it. False bills, absolutely. Phantom companies, absolutely. Okay? So that I can create a phantom company, raise false purchase bills and take false input credit. It happens. People take input credit on fudgy bills. It happens. The same bill is claimed as input credit by 3 companies. That also happens. All of those are problems which the government has found difficult to deal with. No doubt. Those were in the days when enough technical support was not available to the government to deal with it. GST as a law has been built ground up on a technology base. I have been participant in helping in understanding how at a nationwide scale you can do invoice level matching prior to allowing credit. So there is no question of a false bill coming into existence. Can a false company come into existence? Yes, it can come into existence. Can a false company remain undetected? Impossible. So all the rationale which the government had in the past no longer exists. As long as I as a supplier acknowledge my liability to the government, my buyers should get the right of that asset. It should no longer be the responsibility of my buyer to ensure that I execute my liability. They don't have any control over it. If Priyam Bhai is my buyer, he may be buying maybe 5 lakh rupees worth of material from me. For him, it is 1 lakh rupees worth of input credit which is at risk. My total turnover may be 200 crores. What control does he have over my compliance? This fundamental principle must get forced through if we want GST to succeed. A national economy requires massive amount of businesses to succeed. It is not just about the top 500 businesses succeeding or the top 5,000 businesses succeeding. If the millions of SMEs don't succeed and they don't grow, the economy will fail. It's nothing to do with whether individual businesses will fail. It's not to do with just you all failing. It's not about Tally failing. Our country will fail. And it is our responsibility to ensure that it does not fail. I have been told multiple times on this specific subject that don't get so passionate about it. Allow the law to come. We will correct things as we find flaws. If you are sick, someone can take care of you. Someone can revive you. If you are dead, no one can. As a profession, you will earn if your clients suffer. Doctors earn because their patients suffer. But doctors don't earn when their patients die. And you as chartered accountants will not earn when your clients die. And there is no such thing as temporary death. These are not problems which can be solved in the future. There are many procedural problems which can be solved in the future. So one is not trying to bring out a perfect law. I am not standing here to advocate how do we bring out a perfect GST. It need not be perfect. But it cannot be flawed in these fundamentals. I'll take yet another small example of it. This is 100% the most important problem. There is no second view about it. This is easily the most important problem for the SME. Let's take other smaller problems, but which will blow up in our faces later on, but which are still correctable. One of the promises of GST is one nation, one tax. Remove the boundaries of the state. So businesses are now free to operate across the country with far lower friction than the past. Absolutely right. I have already 17 offices in the country. I intend to have several more because I need to service the massive growing base of my customers. It's not just about wanting to make sale. I can still do centralized sales. But I still require to have offices to serve all of them. I'm not unhappy that each of them require an independent GSTI registration. Absolutely fair. The government requires traceability. They also require me to furnish every year my net profit per branch and net profit after tax per branch. I don't think in any of our histories, any of us ever calculated net profit per branch. It's not because the concept of net profit is a direct tax problem. It's not an indirect tax problem. But that's the kind of information which is being sought. And again, these are not getting corrected. We have got a draft law, we have got a revised draft law. Between the original draft law and the noise which was made and the revised draft law, when these fundamentals don't get corrected, we have to question how we, and especially all of you as chartered accountants, have been able to help the nation reach to where it should be reaching. My genuine, fervent appeal to all of you. As Indians, we have grown up to accept fate. किस्मत में है, क्या करें? अपने क्या कर सकते हैं? Let us recognize we do have a far more responsive government. In this last 15-20 years that I have dealt with various offices of the government, this is the first time that when I seen a government which wants to listen. The problem is, are enough people speaking, or have we all got so used to not speaking कि क्या फायदा बोलने से, कि that even though they are willing to listen, they are not getting the right inputs. Please make it your mission, your mandate. GST can change India positively. If these flaws are allowed to remain, it can kill India permanently. It is your responsibility to correct it. It is our responsibility to correct it. I, as a citizen of the country, is also standing here with the same responsibility. And I am making that statement publicly to you. I have been making that statement publicly to the government. I have been making that statement publicly to all my customers. Let me shift to the more positive side of GST. Talk to 10 of your clients. Ask them, how are they preparing for GST? What do they think about GST? We have been talking to hundreds of customers of Tally. Then what are they thinking about GST? They have a simple answer. हमें क्या करना है? हमारा चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट देखेगा ना? That's the present reality. Scary reality. People don't understand the law enough. They are not supposed to. None of us are supposed to understand the Indian Penal Code. We are supposed to follow it. So businessmen are not supposed to understand the law. They are supposed to follow it, but they don't even know what is it that they are required to follow tomorrow. Mangesh Bhai rightly brought out, it is not just replacing VAT with GST and replacing 14% with 18% or whatever the rate will turn out to be. But the reality is, most businessmen think that that's what it is going to be. एक नया टैक्स आ जाएगा, एक नया रेट आ जाएगा, और क्या करना है हमें? The fact that for every business, the entire purchasing process will need to undergo change if they require to remain competitive and if they require to take advantage. Because every single invoice, if they lose 20%, or even in a single invoice if they lose 20%, it hits their bottom line. You will be surprised so few businessmen get this fundamental principle. They have never lost that money before. So they don't believe they are going to lose it tomorrow. Forget about payment linkage. Even with invoice linkage, they are going to stand to lose money if they don't modify the discipline of their purchasing. People think that just by my remaining compliant, I'm okay. That's all I require to do. I have to worry about whether my books are okay. And for my books to be okay, that's why I pay chartered accountants. They will make sure my books are okay. That's it. The fact that my suppliers, and not just of my goods, but even of my services, in the past I never got benefit of those services as input credit. If they are not disciplined, my bottom line is affected, has never happened in the history of Indian business before. And Indian businesses don't get it. And I'm sad to say that with multiple chartered accountants that I have discussed, neither are they taking it with adequate seriousness to tell their clients that the time to prepare is now. The time to prepare is not when the law is announced. The intent of the law is already announced. The framework of the law is already announced. It will take several weeks and months for every business to understand the fundamental the fundamentals of their suppliers, of their expense suppliers as well as good suppliers, to know how they should change their purchasing behavior, to change the terms under which they buy from them. I know for a fact that my own company has already been instructed that please ensure that we now make payments only after the supplier has uploaded their invoice. I can't afford to lose 20%. We run a low margin business. I can't afford to lose 20% on a single invoice. Forget about several invoices. And all of these are going to take time. They're not going to be easy. Is my supplier IT enabled enough to be able to do so? If my supplier is not IT enabled enough to do so, it doesn't matter what terms and conditions I have with him. I am still the loser. However, overall GST is a simpler process. In spite of these changes which I am referring to in a slightly dramatic manner. I am referring to it in a dramatic manner because the changes are dramatic. Yet, it's an extraordinarily powerful and upcoming framework of tax. Many people have negatively talked about that. Look, they talked about single GST, but there are three: CGST, SGST, IGST. Many people have said, we used to file one return, but now they are saying file 3 returns on the 10th, on the 15th, and the 20th. On the flip side of it, the reality is every single invoice will have only one tax on it, which is either it will have IGST or it will have these two lines called CGST, SGST. So for me as a invoice creator, life is simpler. It is not that it is more complex. It is not more complex. It is very, very simple. If every invoice I raise, I have uploaded, and if all my suppliers have also uploaded their invoice, the entire return process in the month is ridiculously simple. In fact, the whole work is now being done by the government on behalf of the business. Your liability is being calculated by the government. You are being told what to pay. You pay what is being given. And in the happy path, there can be no simpler law. Yes, to make it absolutely simple for each person, it has been assumed in this last 3 years from the time that the GST framework was being developed, it has been assumed that the country is technology enabled. And yes, Tally is one of the technology providers of the country. And are we also working to simplify it? Short answer is absolutely yes. And not just simplify it, we believe we will make it so ridiculously simple that people will be delighted with the new tax regime, provided the flaws have been removed. The day-to-day activity of a business will reduce dramatically. On the flip side of it, historically, a business dealt with the government once in a month. Because they dealt with the government once in a month, in most cases, that's how they dealt with you. Some people have, when you ask chartered accountants that how does your client treat you, people say, they treat me like God. You say, really? No, huh? जब तकलीफ होती है तभी याद करते हैं. तो महीने में एक बार जब टैक्स भरना पड़ता है, उस टाइम पे चार्टर्ड अकाउंट को फोन चला जाता है कि भैया आप देख लीजिएगा. With GST, the interaction of a business with the government will become almost daily. Therefore, the interaction and dependency on you, the color of the dependency will change. Again, I am sad to say that when I have spoken to enough chartered accountants who have been our customers, no one is preparing for that change in their business style. As professionals, people are not preparing for the change. As clients, people are not preparing for the business change. We recognized this about 2.5, 3 months ago, and for the last 1.5 months, we have been putting in as much energy as an individual organization can to try and increase the awareness and spread of these issues to businesses. That's part of the call, which again becomes your responsibility. I will not claim to be the expert on the law and definitely don't want to preach law to the most enlightened and most rigorous profession in the country. My job as an owner of Tally Solutions is to understand the process required to follow the law and understand how to deliver the right technologies for my customers so that they can follow those processes. That is what we are really, really good at, and that is what we are doing. The early part of my speech was not to talk about the law. The early part of my speech was to talk about, as an Indian citizen, the deep scare on what is coming in front of us. Monday and Tuesday, the council is meeting again, and one of the items on the agenda is to accept the draft law, which is a revised draft law. And once they accept that revised draft law, they will table it to the parliament. And then the parliament will pass that law. Still, all is not lost. Up till the 1st of April, or whichever first date that GST becomes applicable, the hope remains that we can still correct the law. Please help to keep that hope alive, and please help to make it happen. The country needs GST. The country needs you to make it the right GST. Thank you.